if you're new from the last public meeting, we are excited to have you here. Your voice is super important. And whatever you bring to the table and whatever your experiences are within or outside of city schools, please raise it. No judgment at all. And also accepting non-closure. This can be a tough one. We are not setting us up to fail. We're not saying that we won't get somewhere. But I think there will be times where we are going to feel that we're not moving as quickly as we could, or that we're not moving at the clip that we would like. I encourage us to just kind of accept that, rest in it a little bit. There's no growth and comfort, so we'll be a little uncomfortable to the extent that we're going to be doing this until June of next year, and then beyond that, I'm certain. If you flip over to your community agreements, maybe to just get a little interactive, turn and talk to the person next to you and maybe just pick 3 that you really like and read them to each other. We agree to address conflict head on. I think so often in groups like this, we tend to suppress. I know myself and Diamante and Rebecca, we duked it out on the phone yesterday around some things that you'll see today, and it was really good to be able to be okay in those tense spaces. So we'll do that. Okay. We're going to push forward. We may not always have these, but it seems appropriate tonight to just share between the last public meeting and now. There's also been a core team meeting where this group is really kind of digging into what is next. How do we even approach the public meetings? What's important for the public to know to inform our work? And so there were some things that came out of that meeting that the district would love to present on. And so that is around teacher contracts, the mentoring that currently exists in city schools, as well as just what does it mean to kind of, I don't really like the phrase climb the ladder because I think the classroom is the most important place, but what does it mean to kind of move throughout various career opportunities within the school system? So Jeremy is going to quickly take us through that.
The group asked before to hear about a couple of things that are in place in the district that we think have some impact on retention, including Black teacher retention. And so I'm going to share a little tidbit about 3 different things. So the first is the teacher contract. So what you have coming around is front and back. So it's actually just the current salary scale for a base teacher, which is a 10-month teacher. On one side, which you see at the top says page 2, is currently in effect. And on the other side is what will be in effect on January 1st of 2019. So lots of detail there. There are a couple things that I want to highlight. So the first is that for the last 7 years, the district has had in place this kind of structure where there are 4 pathways or 4 columns, and when a teacher enters the district based on whether they have prior experience, they may be placed somewhere within that standard pathway or column or somewhere in the professional pathway or column. And then every year, teachers have the opportunity to earn a salary increase by earning what are called achievement units. The short of this is as they demonstrate effectiveness in the classroom and as they engage in professional learning opportunities, they can earn credits toward moving up to the next interval or the next step. On average, in a year, our teachers move about 1.1 or 1.2 steps per year. So actually the average teacher in the district moves slightly more than a step a year. And then the 2 columns that you see at the right are model and lead pathways where teachers can apply and go through a peer-reviewed process where they can be selected as a model teacher or a lead teacher.
Jeremy, can you explain the professional pathway one more time?
Sure. Sure. So a teacher is initially placed either on the standard or professional pathway based on their years of experience. So if I'm a first-year teacher, I will start on the standard pathway at what is currently 48914. And for some teachers who come in with experience, so if I come in and already have 10 years of experience, I may start on the professional pathway. After that, the standard and professional pathways are just based on movement as you earn these achievement units. So earning salary increases, again, on average, a little more than one per year. The model and lead are where you have to go through an application process. So the Human Capital Office has a team of 3 people who report jointly. They report to this joint committee, which is of district officials and Baltimore Teachers Union officials. And their entire job is to support teachers in understanding and taking advantage of opportunities to increase their interval and their pathway over time. I will say a little more to the part about career trajectories about the model pathway. But I think overall, we looked at what the current average teacher salary is for black teachers and for all other teachers. And those averages are almost exactly the same, so they're within $1,000 of each other, which is a blunt way of looking at it, because that doesn't look at years of experience or achievement units earned over time or where you are on this pathway, but says that in its operation, this teacher salary schedule is resulting in similar average salaries for black teachers and other teachers. Yes.
Okay, so say if you're not a teacher that came in with all this experience, how do you get from standard to professional?
Oh, good question. I left this out. So one option to go from standard to professional is to earn these achievement units to move up one or more intervals each year or as you earn them. So when you get to standard professional 5, the next time you earn those achievement units, you would move to the professional scale. Actually, most of our teachers move from the standard scale to the professional scales through an accelerated movement opportunity. So actually, even in your first year, technically, you can apply to move to the professional pathway the next year. You have to show that you've completed new teacher orientation and completed certain coursework. Again, that this joint BTU and district group has decided. So most people move to the professional pathway earlier than after going through 5 steps on the standard scale.
I have a question.
Yes.
So who do you contact? Like, I just completed new teacher training. Does someone in human capital keep a track of that, or do I need to say something or do something?
We keep track of that.
Okay.
I think a more general question, this is Makita, by the way, who told me she was just hired as a teacher at Pimlico Middle School. I will say more generally, this joint group is called the Joint Governing Panel, or JGP. So anytime you have a question about about these kinds of opportunities, you can email JGP at bcps.k12.md.us. So the JGP, again, their entire job is talking to teachers about opportunities to move through this salary scale.
Is that
JGP.
Is that something that's a part of either new hire paperwork or continuing hire, like this, so that people would know?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
That's an important thing for, I think, folks to know, and moreover, probably for administrators to know and be able to share with their teachers, just if that's important. Did you have a?
Okay, that was going to be my question. So when is that information presented to new teachers? The information about the JGP and all that, how would teachers get that information if it's not presented to them in time of hire? How would they know?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure that new teacher orientation doesn't include anything from the JGP themselves. Yeah, I will say outside of that, the JGP's responsibility is finding ways to share this information with teachers. So there's a lot of information about the salary scale and pathways on the website. Earlier this year, this Joint Oversight Committee asked the JGP to survey teachers to find out how they are learning about these opportunities or not, how they want to inform how they're doing their work in the upcoming year. But yeah, I think if we actually are not sharing information about the JGP at New Teacher Orientation, we should be.
And what does JGP stand for?
It's called the Joint Governing Panel.
Okay, so it's JGP at
So this is one of the three things that I was asked to talk about today. The context for this is that negotiating this salary schedule 7 or so years ago made it so that our teachers, generally speaking, not only start their careers higher than almost every district in Maryland, but actually have opportunities to more quickly, if they're earning achievement units and demonstrating effectiveness, to more quickly increase their salary. So there are examples of teachers who became model teachers, for example, after 5 or 6 years. So this is not a case of you have to go step by step all the way through. If you are taking advantage of the opportunities available in the contract, you could get to a really high salary much more quickly than in other districts.
But getting to a model teacher has been easier for our white teachers than our black teachers. And we have way more white teachers making model teacher than black teachers.
So should we look in how many black teachers applied, how many white teachers applied, and then how many was actually approved to be a model teacher?
And the way it started, I know a lot of teachers were grandfathered in years ago. When it first started, we were grandfathered in as model teachers if you had so many years with effective evaluations.
Is that consistent across all minority groups? I'm just curious that model teachers tend to be overwhelmingly white.
The data point that I have, which doesn't get to who applies because we didn't look at that data at this point, and I guess given that we've shifted to model teachers, I'm going to pass around information about the model teacher process. This is just an overview. It's more than what you can look at and digest right now, but is a good takeaway for people who want to personally know more or share more about becoming a model teacher. So it is true that the percentage of model teachers who are black is lower than our overall teacher population. So we've shared here that 44% of our teachers are black or African American, and 36% of model teachers are black or African American. So there is a gap of 7 or 8 percentage points, taking out rounding, between the percentage of model teachers who are black and all teachers who are black.
Can I, really quickly, have, this is actually something I think we would like to explore in just a few minutes so we can get down to like what we attribute that to. Would you mind just sticking it on a Post-it note and putting it on the window? We're going to use the window as a parking lot. So, do you mind just throwing model teacher up? I can put it up here.
What am I parking lot?
Just model teacher, like to what we attribute the disparity in who gets it. I'll throw it up there because I think that's something we should definitely post.
And just to be clear, I think I'm just saying we have not investigated what's underlying that 7 or 8 percentage point gap at this point. We need to, because it could be a variety of things. It could be about the selection process. It could be about who we actually are engaging enough to get them to apply to be a model teacher. It could be that more of one group of model teachers are still leaving the district, because again, this is about not anyone who's ever become a model teacher, but among our people who are here today as model teachers. So this talks about the process. I will say part of the feedback that the Joint Governing Panel gathered earlier this year was that having a fall process and a spring process was not as helpful as supporting people who want to apply over the course of a full year. So this document outlines changes that group just made in the spring leading into the summer to have a full year process where individuals who are interested in potentially applying to be a model teacher can indicate interest in the beginning of the fall, and then they have all year to figure out whether they're actually going to work on an application and then to submit an application later in the spring.
One data point that I think would be interesting is comparing I think attrition is when people drop out of a process, right? I know that a lot of people drop out of model process that plan to complete, but then end up dropping out. So I think we can, by looking at attrition data separated out by race, we can figure out or try to guess out, is it that model teachers are not applying? Is it that African American teachers are not applying for whatever reason? We can get into that. Or is it that people are applying at equal rates, black and white, dropping out, then being accepted in a somewhat equal way? Like, I'm curious about teasing those things out.
I'm also curious about teacher preparation programs as well, because I know that certain programs, prepare to propel, a certain group of teachers into different things. And I haven't participated in any of them, so I don't know specifically for sure, but just based on what I've heard, certain programs are preparing teachers for model track. I mean, just, you're coming in and you're getting prepared.
And let's Teach for America.
Yeah, Teach for America. Yeah, let's be clear. Yeah.
Alumni support.
Yeah.
They have alumni support, and they specifically have a staff person dedicated to supporting their alumni in whatever kind of educational or political venture they want to go to, including model teacher.
So, Jeremy, is there an information packet like this for a professional teacher? Because I feel like we always get information on model, but we're still trying to figure out how to become professional. And it seems like that's like this gray area because there's some type of assumption in the district that I guess teachers are on the professional track or something, but that's the vague part. Like, becoming a model teacher is very clear, but going from standard to professional is where no one knows. We don't understand why it's arbitrary. We don't understand, it's just so much we don't get. So if it's not something like this, can it be something like this created for a professional process over there?
The answer is there is. So I'm hearing that and I again will say the joint governing panel has the responsibility as a district-union collaboration to really find ways to make sure the information is getting out. I'm hearing that it's not getting out. But just to answer that, yeah. So there is an overview that also tells about how you can apply for accelerated movement to the professional pathway. And actually, it's a pretty high success rate for applicants who apply to go to the professional pathway through accelerated movement. I don't know the number offhand, but it is a handful of people who actually don't make it through that process when they apply. The third and final thing I'm going to pass around is a little bit of information about mentoring and then some information gathered from a principal on the other page. So sorry for the misnumbering. If you start on page 2 rather than page 1, it says who receives mentoring at the top. So this really focuses on a couple of aspects of teacher induction, one being the new Teacher Summer Institute and or school site orientation that happens when you first are hired into the district, and then the centrally provided or centrally coordinated site-based mentoring. So you can just see on the second column, if you're a new teacher in your first year in the district, you participate in all of those, including being assigned a school-based mentor and receiving specific supports from that mentor. And then you can just see in the next column, if you are new to the district but not new to the profession, just to be really clear about this, you still receive all of those same supports in your first year in the district. And then the two columns at the right show that, again, regardless of whether you have prior experience in your second and third year in the district, you continue to be assigned a school-based mentor and receive certain required supports. This is really outlined in Maryland law, what has to be included in the mentoring program.
Is this new? This doesn't.
Yeah, this is not active at all.
At all.
When was this effective?
So this is what is supposed to be in place. There has been, I think historically, a capacity challenge among the site-based mentors in being able to reach all second and third year teachers. First year teachers should have an assigned mentor.
No. So when you talk about mentoring, you're in actuality, you are speaking about someone with a caseload of students in a classroom that is overpopulated, and you are speaking about them mentoring a first-year teacher. So what usually happens is, because the resources are not there to have a person dedicated to just mentoring the first-year teachers, you're lacking the time to actually invest in this mentoring program, and it is very ineffective. And many teachers fall by the wayside unless they are naturally endowed with resourcefulness. And it's not effective for first year, second year, third year, or continuing teachers, because there's not a program solely dedicated to investing in the capacity of your teachers.
I mean, what I'm hearing there is not full-time capacity, right? Yeah. Which, I mean, our team, the person who coordinates mentors, will say that absolutely, that at some time in the past, some of us who were here remember Blum mentoring program, where there were some full-time mentors. We have not, in quite a few years, had full-time mentors. So that's part of the challenge that you've called out.
But I also think with many things, like, it's on paper. Like, there was a paper given to the new teachers at Summer Institute. Like, it's on paper that every school has a mentor.
And with that expectation that every school has a mentor, if this is on paper and new teachers come in believing this is to happen and they get to their schools and it doesn't, then they're upset and angry and they feel like they were lied to, which then affects their performance, and they're wanting to stay in the classroom because this is what they were told, instead of saying that this is what we would like, but we don't have this. It's a lie to set people up who are coming into the profession and to think that this is going to exist. And then when people keep saying this, then teachers are evaluated through this lens, and this isn't happening. And so that affects what people are saying. Well, you have this, these things are offered, but you really don't. And I think it would be fair if we said that this is the goal and we don't have it. Right. And I think I could live with that. But what happens, because this is being spoken and printed and shared, it becomes a lens through which we are held to and responsible and evaluated, including principals. They have that on them. So
every school is responsible for this program. So a lot of schools, what they've done, they've used non-classroom teaching. So non-teaching class, like a lead teacher or an associate, that takes on their responsibility. Because an associate may not have a teaching load, but they should still be supporting instruction as well. So a lot of schools, you'll see they've been moving towards educational associates that work as a dean of academics, in a sense, and they support those teachers. Or I've seen some models where if she's a strong math teacher, she's only teaching first period, because I expect the rest of the day she's going to be mentoring, coaching. So it all depends on leadership. And so I think maybe we can talk about how can our IOEDs help principals kind of mentor. How can we get principal supervisors to help support principals in making sure that the mentors have the capacity, one, and two, have the timing to do this work, right? Because if you don't have the timing, then this is just a checklist. Hey, she's my mentee.
The mentorship, in my opinion, looks so differently depending on what school you're in. Because something that you just brought up in regards to ed associates, they cost differently than a regular teacher.
And it goes back to the budget.
And it goes back to the budget. And then so also, and I mean, even thinking of my school, when you're cutting teachers and hiring ed associates or keeping ed associates, then it puts more burden on the teachers in the classroom, because then that classroom load gets higher. So
what you see naturally is that African American teachers tend to be in schools that have less resources and less finances. And so the bigger question is, okay, so then how do we as a district try to redistribute our teachers in such a way that those lowest performing schools are not the most highly concentrated with African American and other minorities? And I can speak to that personally. I started off at Lamel, which is no longer open. It was one of the most difficult schools in this district. And then I went to Garrison, which is no longer open. And then I went to James McHenry. And then So I went through the fire, basically, and now I'm at City Neighbors High School, which is a total different culture. But I took a long route to get there. But I was fortunate enough to have a Blum mentor, which was an awesome program. I had her for 1 year. It was the last year that they had them. And so I think, like I said, the bigger question for us at this point is, okay, so now how do we position African American teachers to make these choices? Because in the beginning, I wasn't making the choices. I was just getting the job. Now I'm more experienced, and so now I'm making choices. And so that actually starts before you're hired a little bit. You understand what I'm saying? Before you go into get a schools, how do we get the information out to African American teachers? Well, these are some of the things that you want to look for. If you want to jump in the fire, go ahead. But know that this is what it looks like, and getting them exposed to other schools, because I know during my recruitment process I was not exposed to certain schools. That's just the bottom line.
Exactly.
What I'm kind of hearing you say is we need to figure out how to accelerate the pace of you need to know what you don't know.
Yes.
Upon coming in, right? So you can make conscious choices that you wouldn't know even exist to make. Right, how do we front load that a little bit?
And if we have a capacity issue with mentors, I think because we know that a lot of black teachers are placed at the lowest performing, most high stressful schools, and somehow those are the schools that get the least amount of resources, because I can almost promise that all of the mentors are probably at all of the schools that are doing well. So maybe that needs to shift so that if we can't put mentors in every school, you put the mentors where it's most needed, not where there's already plentiful resources and the principal is great at being set. Because if it's dependent on leadership, most schools that are performing well have a good principal, and they're probably being savvy about their budget and all these things, and so bam, they are figuring out how to always have a mentor. And then vice versa, at some of these schools we're mentioning, we end up with nothing.
Let me pause us. I don't want to actually interrupt this conversation, but I think we might be able to get into it a little more deeply. If you look on your agenda, where it says planning for recommendations, prioritizing Big Rock issues, if you would like to add mentoring and any of these things on the parking lot to those issues, when we get to that, I'll set up a way for us to explore that more deeply, because I think it definitely deserves being explored, and it actually didn't come up last time. So I think that speaks a lot to why this group is so important.
It could be added to the second bullet, leaders not properly supported, so can't support teachers.
Yeah.
Right. We can put it in here.
Yes.
One thing, just because I like data and I have this data available, so I think an important point, I heard an important point, which is about how black teachers are assigned. I will say a lot of the research across the country is about assignment across districts, not just within districts. So the place you see this more is when you compare districts. So Baltimore has 10% of Maryland's teachers, but we have 37% of Maryland's black teachers. There's actually a positive story there, right? That more than a third of all the black teachers in Maryland teach here in Baltimore City. That also does mean that black teachers are more likely to teach in a place where the needs are higher. So that is absolutely true. I don't want to advocate for things that would make our Maryland black teachers choose other districts, but I will say we should look into within district, I think, a little more comprehensively. I know earlier this year we did look at whether African American teachers are more likely to be in schools with higher student poverty rates, and we saw very little difference in the assignment within the district. But maybe student poverty rate is not the right or only thing to look at that based on, because I do often hear that people's experience in the district is that black teachers are placed in certain schools.
It is consistent with the research, though. If you look at some of our surrounding suburban counties, the most minority teachers, but overwhelmingly black teachers, are often placed in the most needy schools. even in your Howard and Montgomery counties. There's also an interesting toggle back and forth between Baltimore City and PG County that happens with teachers. There seems to be in years when PG County sees less black teachers, Baltimore City sees an influx and then back and forth. So we should probably suss out what that means and why that's occurring. Go ahead, yes, please, go ahead.
I'm going to yield to Janine first.
I see that as, even when we were talking about the model teacher pathway and how there is a disparity between white teachers and black teachers in the model teacher pathway, I see that as the recruitment strategy and the lens of the teacher. Is it career investment, or is it career advancement, or is it community investment? The spirit and the passions are different, and they come across different. They are delivered differently. I was in the city for 12 years, and in hindsight, there was no career advancement. There was money, but I just recently finished my dissertation and got my doctorate. And my goal is to teach teachers. So I decided to leave Baltimore City because there was no opportunity for me to actually get that experience under my belt. So with the career advancement, is it a situation where we are pulling on the heartstrings of our black teachers and violating, I don't want to say violating that emotional connection, and forgetting about, I am a teacher, I'm here to perfect my craft, and I'm a professional. I spent as many years as a lot of doctors, medical doctors, and I deserve to be advanced, and I deserve to be developed just like any other person. And I think that's where you see, okay, there's a lot of black teachers in the city because we feel that we need to give back to the community. However, who is giving back and feeding us?
Right. Can we can we list schools by percentage of black teachers and start to kind of like throw some testable theories out there? Because if it's not poverty, then I do think that there's something that we can kind of, it could be achievement. Like but looking at a list, an ordered list with like, I can guess what schools are going to be at the top, I can guess what schools are going to be at the bottom, but I think we need to set eyes on that list in order to create some testable theories. And then to quickly go back to something that caught my ear in the mentoring piece, someone's name is, in every single school, someone's name is written down as the new teacher mentor. The question is that mentoring actually happening?
Right.
Yep.
Mine is like 2 minutes. Jeremy, this is not to pick on you, but I do want to name this because I feel like, and I wasn't here the first one, I don't think norms and agreements, but I came to a Black People's meeting is what I thought. And I heard you say you had some data and then you gave the numbers, and I just want to say other people were speaking data as well. So for me, that's a place of tension as a Black person, that oftentimes what gets qualified is data. So I went back to what you all have here on the paper about the value of both quantitative and qualitative, and I just want to name that because I want us to be aware of what gets named as data, even in our language when we're interacting with one another. And so I'm just using that as a way to put that into the space he named that he was giving data, and then it was percentages, and I want to name that other people were giving data too. It didn't have a number, and so how we speak data is all different.
Just to qualify that ranking by poverty, I think it's interesting to rate students by rating it by population poverty of students, right? But we know that this is Baltimore City, so those numbers are always going to be large. I think it will also be interesting to rate it by school budget. So because you and I could have the same percentage of population that's in poverty, but because of numbers, for whatever reason, my school might have a higher budget.
Exactly.
So the
percentage of Black teachers by school.
So we were saying rank the schools, rank them.
So
you were saying by poverty, basically, right?
No, we said by the percentage of Black teachers.
Percentage of Black teachers, and then look at and then look at the poverty level?
Well, I didn't want to look at the poverty level. I just wanted to see if we ranked all of the schools by their percentage of black teachers, if we could see any patterns within that list.
I think it's interesting to look at school budget versus just student poverty level, because I know the data that she gave was student poverty level, which we usually use, right? That's common in education. But we could have side by side two schools that have the same level of student poverty with different budgets, different operating budgets.
And I think that speaks a lot to the resources. So we know that we have fair student funding here in Baltimore City. So the schools are funded based on a per pupil amount. And so the schools that have more students are going to have more resources and potentially have a different population of teachers.
I want to elevate just our point around data, and just as we're sensitively kind of looking at things moving forward. We're going to truncate this next session. We're going to always have a little discussion portion just to get us all rooted in a common experience, if you will. And tonight we'll experience data. I am human, so I'm biased too, so I could pull any kind of data and throw it together. So I just want to put that out there. There's no rhyme or reason to why I've thrown these pages together. It's just data around student retention, so I want to call that out. What I'd love for you to do is just find yourselves in a group of 3, preferably people you don't know very well. Or don't like so far. And all I want you to do is just peruse the data in however you'd like. There are charts and graphs, and there's also just like you can read a research blurb. During our last public meeting, we asked some questions, and from those questions, a lot of things really bubbled up as some of the main things that we think are keeping black teachers from being recruited and or retained here in the district. If you look on page 1 of that agenda, those are those big rock issues that came out. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is a couple of things over the next 30 minutes, and we'll kind of play with the time as necessary, because I know we're kind of getting close there. Okay, so here's what I want you to do over the next 30 minutes. We know that we can't tackle everything at once, so as a group, I'm going to want you to prioritize just 2 or 3 of these issues that you think in the next couple of months we can foreseeably start to address within our locus of control. That's going to feel upsetting, but just take those 2 to 3 that are really, really within our locus of control. I would ask you to add to those big rock issues these that came up tonight, because these weren't on here last week, but they really kind of were important and significant to us tonight. So I think that's around mentoring, and primarily the model teacher role acquisition, how that role is kind of attained. So add those to there. Once you as a group have prioritized those 2 to 3 issues in whatever voting format or duking it out, however you'd like to do that, I want you to then do a root cause analysis. And most of you have probably heard of this. How many people have heard of the 5 Whys protocol? Right? Maybe you've done that. If not, let me just run you through it really quickly. And this is going to be an attempt to get down to, why is compensation an issue here in the city? So I don't mean to be condescending. It's just to get group participation. When I point to you, you're going to say why. Is that okay? Okay. So the 5 Whys protocol is an attempt to dig really deep into the reason why something is occurring so that you get down to an action step that you can execute. So I pulled my car in my driveway, or in my garage, and I got a flat tire.
Why?
There are always nails on my garage floor.
Why?
They fall off of this wet shelf that sits on my wall.
Why?
But the why question there is not just why, it's what? Why is what wet? Why is the shelf wet? So ask me that.
Why is the shelf wet?
Water kind of gets onto that shelf from a leaky window.
Why is the window leaking?
What's the question?
Why is the window leaking?
So the frame of the window is rotted out.
Why is it rotted?
The frame of that window is rotted out.
Yeah, why
right?
don't you get it fixed?
Listen, my house needs help. Now, we can stop there. That was already 5 Whys. We can keep going. But here's the issue. Most of the time, when we're problem solving, we just go fix the tire.
Right.
But what do we really need to fix?
The window.
Right. If we fix the window frame,
Right.
we can sort out what's happening with the tire. So what you're going to do for the 2 to 3 prioritized areas you choose is you're going to 5 why them. Now this might be all conjecture for you, right? Maybe it's not within your purview to identify why you feel that there's a lack of effective PD in the district. But use the people around you. That's why it's so important that you guys are the experts in the room. Teachers, specialists, principals, etc. Okay? So just use a little bit of conjecture and start to think about, well, why is this an issue? And then make sure you're asking the right why question. If you get stuck, raise your hand. I'll come around. I'll be buzzing around anyway. Once you get done with that, then start to provide, you probably won't have time for this today, but try to provide a few recommendations that you think will address the final action item that you came up with. So for me, it would be, well, okay, I need to fix the frame above my window. Let me come up with a list of recommendations as to how I could do that. Here's a little worksheet to help you through. What would be great is if you could just find somebody in your group who could share the priorities you came up with. You don't have to walk us through all your whys, you can, but give us what your kind of final root cause was, and give us some of the recommendations you started thinking about. And if you didn't get a chance to think about recommendations, that's okay. But again, just one person from your group, give us the priorities you came up with. I'll drop them down here. And give us your root cause for those priorities and any recommendations you have.
We did teachers not provided support or mentoring. And school leaders or principal APs are overtaxed and prioritized. The district is not making teacher mentoring a priority. Then we went down to focus on test data, graduation rates, and those things of that nature, and literacy. And then
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you go back? What was your problem statement one more time?
Teachers are not provided support or mentoring.
Got it. Okay.
Just say federal funding.
Oh, federal funding trends.
What, can you explain that?
So, whatever the hot word is out on the street, we tend to follow that to get that funding, and then we miss things.
Give an example of the hot word.
So right now, trauma-informed care.
Yes. Say it. What about that trauma-informed?
And then we do not push back against what is not good for our children in Baltimore. So one of the action steps to that thing was to stand up for teacher mentoring, make it a reality. District fund the mentoring process if that's coming out of central office. Those things like that, like as a requirement. It's not something that you're trying to guess or trying to figure out if anybody's doing it. Like, you pay somebody to do this, and now you got to do it. That's your job security. You got to make sure you do that.
A teacher mentor is a mandate that a teacher mentor is a part of every school budget, and that the teacher mentor has a decreased workload.
So you can't be a teacher and a teacher.
A full-time teacher.
100 students, and you still got to be a teacher mentor too. It's not going to work. It's not.
Right. Were there other folks who prioritized this one and who either had a different root cause or different recommendation? Please weigh in. I'll have all you guys weigh in. Go ahead.
I mean, just in terms of action steps, we talked a lot about standardizing mentoring across the district so that it's not up to every principal to figure out how to implement the requirements. And potentially utilizing another outside program. I'm not actually familiar with the one that was mentioned before, but there was it sounded like an outside mentoring program that was mentioned that existed in the past. So potentially utilizing some other resources.
Did you guys get to a different root cause than they did by chance?
We ended up talking a lot about the school's autonomy over their personnel and how to allocate both their time and also the personnel to support, new teachers versus we talked about how in some cases the mentor teachers only have 5 years of experience or, different things like that. So we talked a lot about school autonomy.
Thank you. Christine, weigh in and you guys go.
So far, I think we've, in this offering solutions for mentoring. We've talked about standardizing it, and that to me sounds like it goes back to district office. We've talked about making it a mandate in schools, and as a librarian, let me tell you that librarians are mandated too. And I feel that unfunded mandates are a recipe for disaster because librarians are mandated. A full-time certified librarian is mandated, and that doesn't happen. But I would offer a third option for.
Didn't know that. I don't remember last time I was saying a librarian.
Right?
I'm
right here.
She's right here.
Yeah. A third option for mentoring, because it's so relational and because I think like anything relational, there's like an element of chemistry there and there's an element of chance. Standardizing it, I mean, my tendency is always to go in the opposite direction and make it more grassroots and create like spaces and structures where teachers can build relationships and mentor each other rather than sending it to an office where, like, quite frankly, like some of their PD is great.
Majority of them are trained.
And some of it needs more robustness.
I just want to add a piece of nuance to that. I think part of that's awkward, but part of the challenge I think is like being honest about like if we're not providing mentoring, but we have to because it's a regulation. Like instead of covering and pretending that we are, stopping that process. So part of like the standing up process is like if teachers are willing to stand up and say this isn't happening, like the district also standing up to say like this isn't happening and this is why, and so that we're together in that. Stepping up to talk to the state or wherever that conversation needs to happen to get the funding to do it for real.
I think that often we assume that because somebody else is responsible for it, that it's their full responsibility. But I always tell parents, this is our school. It's called shared accountability. Because we can provide PDs, right? We can get your needs assessment done. We might send you a survey, hey, can you complete this assessment, see what you need for help with? I don't even know how I'm good. And then October comes in, I'm stressed out about this, well, what happened? And so I think that we talk about, I don't want to like the word mandate because then it becomes compliance check, and compliance doesn't lead to effective results, right? It's about what is best practice. We know you need to be mentored, anything, whether you're an athlete, even adults need mentors, right? That's why principals need mentors too, because they got to be developed to be a principal. As the, what's your name, I'm sorry? Edwin said, his principal couldn't support him in the teacher level, because he didn't have the skills to do it. So now you got two frustrated people who are not moving student achievement. So I think we have to look at, by norming, we're talking about norming practice, not saying, Lisa, that's how you're going to mentor people, give her a pamphlet. We're not talking about step-by-step guidance. We're talking about what does mentoring look like, sound like, and feel like. Because no matter what school you go to, you should know what a mentor is. And the relationship with that mentor can change or break someone's career. Because research shows within the first 5 years, 50% of people leave the profession, right? And so when we talk about support from administration, is that really support from administration or because the administration didn't give you support of a mentor to help you out, right? There's some things the admin cannot do. I can't really coach you because I'm the evaluator, right? So there are certain things I got to be careful because the lines blend. But I can assign Lisa to mentor you, and I'm giving her feedback to make sure you're getting results. But that means as a teacher, hey, Principal so-and-so, don't wait till June saying I'm about to leave because you didn't help me. Tell them throughout the way, hey, what's going on? I'm not feeling supported. Because guess what? Veteran teachers need support too.
Yeah.
Especially with Common Core and all these changes, framework, it's a change mindset. So we need mentoring, not just the first 3 years.
Defining mentoring really clearly. Yes. Because I would say, personal opinion, that an enlightened and developed leader can mentor and coach and evaluate. And then that takes time, right? Or it takes very specific development. I was hearing a lot about autonomy, and I think we have to be careful. And as a working group, we might need to, at some point, put a stake in the ground because autonomy, it's like a pendulum that swings, right? If you look at all urban school districts, it's like district autonomy is bad, we want school autonomy, and then 10 years later, schools have too much autonomy, we want to go back to the district. So we need to figure out what that looks like and what that means.
It needs to be a working relationship between both because at the end of the day, the principal may have something, but they still have to be approved for whatever it is.
Is there a third option?
So someone needs to be actually looking at what's going on, and but that whoever that person is over top of the principal, back to mentoring needs to know what they're doing as well, to say, well, I may not be in your school every day. You know what's going on, right, in your building, but you also need to be able to explain to me why this makes sense and why it doesn't.
Right.
And then if there's another resource in-house, not outside the district, across 50
Right.
states,
Right.
going to find help when you got it right here in-house.
Right.
What were some of the other priorities that came out of your conversations?
So we said that the problem is that new / existing teachers are not provided with information regarding coursework needed to receive certification. That's one of the problems. I just came in last school year as a new teacher and never received a transcript analysis, never actually received a contract, never sat down with anybody. But at the conclusion of the school year, I was actually let go due to having a conditional certificate and just some other things, but we'll expand. So we said that why is this happening? Certification, recertification analysis, seeing what teachers need, what coursework, and aligning them with the proper schools to get the information that they need to get the coursework. Also with testing as well. We talked about praxis testing. Teachers need assistance with praxis testing as well. So we mentioned that BTU was offering some coursework, but we didn't know, or some assistance, but we didn't know whether or not the district was providing anything. Also, BCPS needs a relationship with all teachers and staff, not just ones going through some of the programs, for instance, like the BCTR and the TFA. So, the district needs to reach out to teachers that didn't come through a program as well to see where they are. Also, we talked about the district and school staff incentivizing certification rather than using it as a penalty. Right. So saying like, you didn't do whatever, and so we're taking your certification. And this is my specific example. Incentivize. Come up with ways and suggestions on how we can get teachers actively involved in the certification process. Also, and we said why, because efficiency, we don't want to waste teachers' time and money. Mm-hmm. So some of the actions we said, the Office of Human Capital or some individual, I guess some of the offices in BCPS, taking an active and progressive role in assisting teachers with certification advancement, transcript analysis, PDs from the certification office or human capital regarding courses, schools, aligning teachers with what it is they need, and then again, active mentorship.
Thank you. That's huge. Thank you.
We did certification too. We just had a couple of different whys.
Okay.
Actually, we did out-of-pocket expenses, but it was in conjunction with certification. Because our specific problem was teachers have to go in their pocket to pay for classes to be certified, despite already being qualified. And our why was teacher programs are inadequate. Our why for that was that MSDE is not explicit about what classes they want. And then that's where I don't know why they're not explicit about classes they want. But our action was give a list of approved classes for each certification.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not a list that says like we need you to take beginning psychology. Because for me it was, I needed to know which one, Psych 207, Psych 2, which one, because I'm not going to keep spending money and sending you my transcript and then you say, oh, this is not the one we wanted. Just
the
give
website
me
is innavigable at MSDE.
Yeah.
You don't know why.
No.
And it's expensive.
Yeah, it's very expensive, especially for teachers. Like in my position, I have a master's in secondary education. I passed 1,800 praxis.
Right.
And now you asking me to still take these classes, but you're not paying me no more.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So would that ask of MSDE come from like a joint working group from city schools or from I'm sure this might be something that Montgomery County, Howard County, and others are facing. I wonder if a joint ask to MSDE for clarification of coursework.
Yeah, I'm all about grassroots
impactful.
like Christina. I say, yeah. I don't know how much asking we would have to do to get it done, because if you've ever worked with MSDE just to get certification and what classes you need and somebody it's like you want to kill yourself and everybody in the MSDE office.
But I want to wonder because I'm going through this right now too. I have my master's, but I need recertification. I can't figure out what I need, and it's all expensive. But
as I'm trying to Google myself into an answer here.
Right.
Montgomery County had their courses were only $100 for 3 credits, and I'm just like, why is it so cheap for them? Yeah. And they had everything listed up there. I'm just like, why can Montgomery County do things that we can't? And I think that way a lot, but.
No, it's hard. You remember when I said earlier about the PG County, Baltimore City pendulum? Yeah. There was some work that PG County did in kind of lowering some of their courses they offered, and that becomes, I think, Jeremy, to your group's point, this notion of making it more attractive to be in this city. What are some of those things within our locus of control we might be able to do?
I think this is a really important point because everybody that was like this whole corner, like first of all, this teacher right here is about to leave because of this issue. We got somebody back there that want to teach a black male, which we don't have enough of. They can't get in because of this issue. I'm even considering, like, look, like I can't put so much money into these courses when I'm already teaching for y'all. I feel overqualified. And you're being petty about these courses. You understand what I mean? And so I think that it's a really, really big issue. Really big issue.
And can I just speak to, the benefit of coming in through Teach for America was that, like, all 75 of us showed up at North Avenue on the same day, and the whole thing was just taken care of. Right? Versus, like, having to navigate that process on your own, having an intermediary who, like, batch cohort processes you, it's completely different. It's like night and day.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, I was going to go to. Is that okay? Yes, please. I just think it piggybacks because we took a look at compensation, and why is it so important to African American teachers in particular. And we said one of the reasons, first starting off, African American teachers have higher financial demands for equal compensation, and the reason being is because of a general lower socioeconomic status, which we understand across all professions. Like nationally, this is what we look at, and it has to do with less housing equity, higher student loans, lower age of childbirth. Why is that? Because of less legacy wealth, because of less foundation. Why is that? Because America. That's all we got. America. So what can we do? What can we do, right, with America? What can we do? So similar to where you have programs like Black Student Unions or NAACP creating organizations, and they don't necessarily have to be exclusive to African American people, that target some of these issues that we know African American teachers have. So say, for example, personally, I did go through BCTR, which was a blessing, but I started with a son. When I started teaching, I had a 2-year-old son. Most of my cohorts who were in BCTR didn't even have pets. Right. And so they had no idea what it was like to get someone dressed in the morning and have to do all these things with a very low income, living in the same neighborhoods that I taught in. It brought a different dynamic. And so I think having organized support for teachers, and then at the same time definitely not qualifying for any type of social services. I always made just enough not to get any of it. I mean, side note, Maryland just doubled its requirements for childcare, and I was like, thank you. I was excited because I just don't qualify, and as a result I have to make different choices, even though I am a professional and I'm expected to make professional expectations. So having organizations that support people with being professionals under these different circumstances, organizing paperwork, dealing with even loans and emergency loans when you don't have a car, when these type of things, having advocacy groups and outreach groups and organized development around some of these issues that we know African American teachers deal with. And it doesn't even have to be exclusive, because African American teachers will gravitate toward those programs because that's what they're working with. So that's what we talked about.
I actually think the opposite will happen. I think that unless you do outreach specifically to African Americans, I think more white teachers will gravitate towards that.
I turned around and said that I did some targeted stuff just for black teachers, and they did not show up, and the white people took advantage of all the free hookup.
Because you didn't say black.
No, I did.
Oh, you did?
Oh, I did. I did.
So you think it has to do with marketing or information?
It's mindset. It's mindset. It's my shame.
The next cohort is 740.
We try to tackle the phrase lack of administrative support because in this conversation group, we were trying to figure out what does that mean, right? And so in that, we talked about some leaders are not supported, so they can't support teachers. If they're not being coached as principals, how can I effectively coach my teachers, right? That was one of the whys. Also, some principals don't have skill sets. Because you're a great teacher does not mean you're going to be a great principal. And so we have to stop this pipeline of moving everybody from classroom to administration. No, sometimes you got to stay in the classroom because you're really great at that. Because admin's a different hat you need to wear. If you're not able to do that, then you're not going to be an effective leader. Who determines what support is needed, right? Is it a principal saying, this is what you need, Lisa? Or is it a combined conversation with teacher and principal share conversation? Not just the checklist the IDP is due October 15 every year. All right, this is what your goals are. Awesome. You signed it, I signed it. We never touch the IDP ever again. For those who don't know what IDP is, it's the individual development plan or program that teachers are supposed to do with the principals. But a lot of times it's just a checklist and no one actually follows up. So if she wants to be developed as an effective teacher, then what am I doing to follow up on the IDP? Right? And then we talked about the action plan. We have to make a coaching cycle for principals.
Yes.
So that they know what it takes to, so what are you doing in the fall versus second quarter with teachers so that we see development and pathways. There should be some goals created that will show progress in the coaching cycle. It doesn't have to be the principal, but the principal should be working with a group of people that can lead that work. And PD. The often word is dreaded PD, but how to redefine PD so that both admin get their own differentiated learning and how teachers get their own differentiated learning, right? Because as educators, we often pontificate, we got to differentiate learning for our young people, but we never differentiate learning for adult learners. So we have to practice what we preach, in a sense, and make sure that educators of all grade levels and all positions are getting their own individual pathways too. Because that way, and my issue is, as a principal, is a relationship with staff, then I need PD about talking to people. If I'm a teacher that struggles with parent communication, then that should be a focus area for me. How do I engage parents? So it's not just classroom manager 101. We're like, oh, here we go. Rules from A1. All right, we talked about rules every year. I'm the one to write the rules for the school. Why am I got to say this, PD? And then you lose your people, right? So let's be purposeful and strategic in how we do professional development. And my team can add anything I missed.
From a structural perspective, how would you suggest the district go about that?
Which part? Coaching or PD?
Well, both, but when I hear differentiated PD, which is totally right, it is the right way to go. I can hear an Office of Academics going, how do we do this?
Well, I think the most effective way will be, I know people hate surveys, but you ask people at the end of the year, in the beginning of the year, see if anything change over the summertime. What are some needs you need, right? And let people tell us, and then we plan the PD around the year around what the most common things were. And then schools should have their own surveys done. Because what's the point of planning a PD calendar for your team if you never talk to your staff about what the needs are? Because then you're wasting people's time. I don't need objective writing, and I'm a 10-year veteran teacher. It's not going to be effective, right? Because then what creates distrust creates cynicism in education, and then we have people disgruntled. I'm leaving here, and then we have this parking lot conversation, and then everybody loses their essence. I think it's important for us to be strategic and plan out PD based on what people say they need, in collaboration with what people think you need as well.
I just wanted to add to that piece of what Anthony was saying, because that was what our group was really talking about in terms of leaders not properly supported, so they can't support teachers. A lot of times, you took the words right out my mouth, when we put principals in buildings, there is a feeling of that principal saying, I can do this. And then when they get there, it's bigger than who they actually are. So a lot of times it may not be that and coming into a school, becoming a principal, I may not know what I need because this task is so big. The question is, what is my struggle? And then once you can identify with your principal supervisor, look, I'm struggling with this. I'm having trouble with that. You know, how can I get from this place to that place? You know, those are some of the questions that need to be asked to kind of form the professional development that leaders need. Because, again, like they say, you might be excellent in the classroom. You might be highly effective. You know, you can move student data. But we're talking to students. But then now I want you to take that same work and I want you to expound it upon these 30 teachers that are in this building because you're phenomenal with that. I'm good with kids. I may not be able to take that same driver and move it with adults because you have different learning styles. You have different temperaments. You have different adults have different expectations. So the thing is, the professional development with leadership, I feel, needs to tune into who you are as an individual. What can you give to a broader audience? You know, because again, like you might be good with moving data, and that might be a good data point for you, but it takes a whole nother ball game to manage and drive other leaders. So I think the professional development needs to not just only deal with pedagogy, because we do have a big focus on pedagogy professional development. We need to start taking more internal professional, soft skills development and finding out who you are. And then that will answer a lot of the questions as to why data might be lopsided in a building, why is climate off. You know, some people are, you know, constructive type of, you know, leaders, and then you have some people who are autonomy, and you have different types of styles. So that all affects the movement of a building. So I think until we get down to the root of finding out what type of leader that person is, or leadership style, or what they can give or magnify, I think would help to mend a lot of the issues that we have going on in the building. Because if I'm a leader that don't like to talk on the intercom, or I don't really like to, speak to people, that stuff can permeate throughout my building. So it's like, that's an important factor. You have to be an effective communicator when you're in leadership. You have to be able to have those tough conversations. You have to be able to have those uplifting conversations. You know, I noticed that you did outstanding on that math data that I saw in quarter 2. Teachers need those little bits of praise to really push them to say, you know what, my leader recognizes me. They know that my work matters. You know, so I think those types of things are really important with building leadership capacity inside of a building, because it's going to help your teachers become more effective with communication, and the pipeline is going to come down to even to students and parents.
But because my all groups was similar to what you were just saying, because all started off with the mentorship and our needs not being targeted, but they ended up being teachers just being undervalued. Like, I feel like I'm expendable, you know? And I don't think that it's because, I mean, I know I'm not the perfect teacher. I know that there's things I can work on, but I don't think that I certainly don't think I'm expendable. I certainly don't think that you could fire me any day and it's not going to make a difference. But that's the communication I'm receiving from admin right now, right?
That's how all of us feel.
Right. Like, so it doesn't even matter. And yet, they talk about teacher shortage, which I'm going steps back now. But they talk about teacher shortage, but in the same breath, it's we don't matter. So, you know, where do we go from there? And our action, I don't even know if our action's even be effective even, because our action for this was that we'd be able to give feedback to administration or whoever's going to be in charge of our mentorship, that we can do, we mentioned 360 feedback, so they evaluate us, we can evaluate them back to see that, look, I felt that I needed support here and I didn't receive that, and I tried to communicate this with you and you shut me down. And
let me ask, Jeremy, is there a system for upward feedback here in Baltimore City Schools?
No. Part of a principal's evaluation is based on a survey that teachers complete. So there's a piece of an opportunity for that.
So, BCPSS is falling in line with the gentrification issues in Baltimore City. So the defined problem is that BCPSS is falling in line with gentrification. Why? Because the city is being gentrified.
Can you explain what you mean by falling in line with?
Okay, so the city is pushing out lower income people, and they're pushing out pretty much black people. And so the school system is falling in line with that, and they started with black teachers. And now they're moving black families, so those black families move their black children. And so to attract white people, they hire more white teachers. And,
with their white children.
And then they promote the public school in that community, such as Mount Royal now, which used to be majority black, now is majority white from pre-K to third. Different things like that. They also use zoning to help with the gentrification as well. So they're changing zoning laws, and as a matter of fact, Baltimore City was doing a whole rezoning survey last year, and the man even said it when we was in Hamilton, that this, because we are gentrifying Baltimore City. Okay, so the school system is falling in line with the gentrification thing that's happening in urban places. And so my action would be to support the needs of the existing student population instead of contributing to big universities in the city agenda.
The agendas. The big, you're saying instead of contributing
John
to...
Hopkins agenda.
No, I agree.
Towson.
I was just saying, I was saying whether or not you said agenda at the end.
Well, that whole agenda is to gentrify.
Just
And
so
then
I'm
those
clear,
are their strategies.
What is that recommendation for us within our locus of control?
That we have to make sure that we do not close schools because they're along road. If you know the city isn't financially contributing to these disenfranchised communities, why would the school system then further disenfranchise that neighborhood by closing the school, closing a rack, and now have to take children and transport them here, transport them there, then it become an attendance problem, and then CPS and all this stuff is involved, and then they get a Section 8 voucher of more money and ask them to go to the county. Right. And so why wouldn't I go to the county if I'm having so much trouble in the city?
And I get a
my
bigger
child has
5-bedroom
to.
house.
Right.
I hear you. I think it's an important point. I'm trying to figure out how we get that translated in the work that we can do, because these are larger systemic issues, and I think that's right.
Moratorium on closing schools with black children?
Yes, I would like to know
90% or more.
Or what is the formula by which
I think
superintendents
we need
determine?
a neighborhood schools network. Does anybody have a charter network? When it comes to closing neighborhood schools. So that's something that we need. We need more, and not the LEDs, please, no. They do not represent me and my family. I'm sorry.
They don't.
The ILEDs do not represent me and my sons. So I do not think they are the ones that should be specifically on this neighborhood schools network when it comes to closing
I think the whole
schools.
thing with that, the branding of the schools. Like, when you look at the district stuff, there's only certain schools that they are branding or advertising as a whole. So even if you have a school like Mount Royal that was predominantly black at one point and now was predominantly white, right? They're still promoting that
20
school.
years ago, Mount Royal was white. When I was a student in Baltimore City Schools, 27 years ago.
It keeps changing. In the
It keeps
80s, and
changing.
it was black. When I
So
was-
even along that lines, the promotion of the schools is not adequate. They're promoting the Ivy League schools, or they're promoting certain schools for certain things, only sports. You know, little things like that. Like, promote all the schools equally. If this is your district and you're representing what you are trying to represent that makes sense to everyone, then you need to promote those schools in a different way.
That also raises questions for me around district versus kind of school-based marketing and communications, and what's budgeted and how much more principals might be able to ask for to do some of those things. But I think that's a real thing.
The websites, the school websites, they had the district websites that they had, but they think it's not appealing. You know what I'm saying? Unless you go and buy, like a website or a different vendor than what that is. You know what I mean? So like little stuff like that.
I was going to say two things. One, about Keisha's gentrification piece. I think that the way it is very nicely communicated in a PC way is the need to attract more middle class families, and they will. I think people have more open discussions about class in this case than race, and that need to attract more middle class families and to build a tax base to fund our schools. Really just kind of it's the opposite of equity. It's the opposite of equity because we're putting our focus and our resources on the needs of the people who need less. And then the second thing I wanted to add on to was this comment about leadership. And I'm looking at the CEO's blueprint, and I'm looking at all of these pieces of the blueprint that explicitly speak about the need for staff leadership and what's happening there. And so I'm wondering if we can get an update on the blueprint, because the PDFs that I'm seeing online they're a couple months old, like maybe 6 months old. And so I think that I think that this group has valuable things to say to the people who are implementing the CEO's blueprint plan on that leadership piece. And I think that they should hear from us. And we should hear from them to let them to know what is actually happening with developing staff leadership.
Definitely having a very fine lens with year 1 to 3 principles and in development and coaching, because again, a year 1 principal has the same level of autonomy as a year 10 principal, and you have teachers in a building who may have been teaching 2, 3, 4 years, who may be exceptional at their craft of teaching, may be personal barriers or whatever the case may be, which can put a roadblock in their professional productivity. I do think that especially when those principles are in place, that they definitely should be, again, just like teachers, be mandated with a mentor principal, so that way we can kind of diminish a lot of biases and actually look at productivity of the individual and how well they're doing in the classroom versus all the other elements, because it could be it could just be lack of knowledge. That some things happen by way of, but if you have somebody that's pretty much channeling your work or going, standing with you in the work, I think you'll see a difference in that as well. And with teachers, as far as the keeping them with the certification barriers, one of the main concerns that we have is that a lot of black teachers are not passing the praxis. So looking at these high school teachers who, that's basically high school math preferably, start providing them with some AU opportunities to get them in there to teach some of these praxis courses to help with keeping and retaining the teachers as well.